do that or something.
All right. We call to order the Highland Park Board of Education hybrid voting meeting on this Monday, November 25th, 2024. The New Jersey Open Publics Meeting Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In compliance with the Open Publics Meeting Act, the Highland Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be set forth the time, date, and location to be submitted for publication to the Home News Tribune and Star Ledger and posted on the board's website at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board will be given the opportunity to do so before the board adjourns for the evening. Roll call, please.
Dr. Beatty. Ms. Cassel Dunn.
Here.
Dr. Coleman. Dr. Pixley.
Here.
Ms. Prus.
Here.
Dr. Coleman. Ms. Stanio.
Here.
Ms. Vardaman. Ms. Voorhees.
Here. We are now going to recess to executive session. Be it resolved pursuant to the Sunshine Act NJSA 10:4-12 and 13, the Highland Park Board of Education will now meet in closed session to discuss the matters related to HIB and discipline. These exemptions are permitted to be discussed in closed session in accordance with NJSA 10:4-13. Information regarding the board's closed session discussion will be disclosed to the public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. I move that we recess to executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Okay, we're going to reconvene to regular session. I move that we reconvene to regular session.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Beatty,
Here.
Ms. Cassel Dunn,
Here.
Dr. Coleman,
That me? Yes, here. Sorry.
Dr. Pixley,
Here.
Ms. Bruce,
Here.
Dr. Schoolman,
Here.
Ms. Stanio,
Here.
Ms. Vardaman,
Here.
Ms. Voorhees.
Here.
We'll stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We had one communication since our last meeting regarding our board bulletin. We're going to move to approve the minutes from our last hybrid regular public meeting and executive session. I move that we approve the minutes from the hybrid regular public meeting and executive session of October 28th, 2024.
Second.
Dr. Beatty,
Yes.
Ms. Cassel Dunn,
Yes.
Dr. Coleman.
Yes.
Dr. Pixley,
Yes.
Ms. Bruce,
Yes.
Dr. Schoolman,
Yes.
Ms. Stanio,
Yes.
Ms. Vardaman,
Yes.
Ms. Voorhees.
Yes.
And we'll move to our student representative report.
Hi, everyone. For Irving, we look forward to our Thanksgiving feast and show for our kindergarteners and their families. Our first graders will showcase their balloons over Broadway just in time for Thanksgiving this week. We thank our generous families for their support at our Irving PTO Scholastic Book Fair last week. All funds directly support our students. And another huge thanks for the Thanksgiving food donations that will go to a handful of our Irving families, and to Emma Shannon for her thoughtful efforts in collecting warm coats for our Irving students. Parents are so appreciative.
So for Bartle, December 5th is going to be fall picture makeups, and the winter concert is going to be December 19th at 7 p.m. That's all we have for Bartle this week. At the middle school, the winter concert is on December 17th at 7 p.m. Come and join them. If you didn't already know, the Highland Park Library is open back up from their renovations. They've got all sorts of new books, graphic novels, and online resources available. With the help of the library, Mr. DeSigli would like to take a 6th grade ELA classes to the library to browse and obtain a library card. With this card, they'll have access to the library and all that it has to offer. If your child has Mr. DeSigli as their 6th grade ELA teacher and you would like to opt out of your child obtaining a library card, please let Ms. Brady know. The only questions that the library is asking in return for a card is their name, address, and phone number, and their school email address. Mr. DeSigli can collect this information. There's a planned fundraiser being organized by an awesome group of parents. All of the money raised will be used to run a winter dance. Please find the order form in Miss Brady's owl outline, and thank you to the parents who are behind this wonderful initiative. And lastly, for the middle school, Arts High has extended their application deadline until the end of Thanksgiving weekend on November 30th.
And now for the high school, this week on Wednesday is Service Day, and some examples of workshops being run are the Red Cross Club is doing a presentation about why giving blood is important. The Asian Culture Club is having people write a wish and then fold it into a crane for an art installation. Additionally, this month is DECA month, so check out the DECA Instagram to get to know the members of the club and see what they've been up to. This past weekend, the Highland Park Model UN team competed in the Rutgers University Model UN Conference with great success. The play She Kills Monsters premiered. Thank you to all who attended. And the HP Robotics team visited Irving this past week to teach them about robotics and show off some of their robots. The high school winter concert is on December 12th at 7 p.m. and the middle school winter concert is on December 17th at 7 p.m. Both concerts will be in the auditorium, and we hope to see you all there. And finally, we're having our annual blood drive from the Red Cross Club on Friday, December 6th in the high school gym. If you're a parent of a Highland Park student, ask them for information on how to sign up.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions for our student reps?
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. We'll move on to our superintendent's report.
Much better. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm excited to introduce two amazing people, but first I'd like to start with our amazing Irving principal, Miss McNally. Tonight, we're spotlighting two fantastic students. So Miss McNally, I invite you to come up to the podium.
All right, good evening, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I always say this every time. It's definitely one of my favorite things to do. I love recognizing our little ones because it's not easy to receive these recognitions. So everyone, thank you for being here this evening. And again, I am Miss McNally. I am the Irving principal. So it's beyond academics when we choose to spotlight our students at Irving. We're looking for character. We're looking for students that go above and beyond what it means to be a student in school. I look for students that embrace others' differences. School's not always easy, and being a friend is not always easy either. And we also look for friends that make positive decisions. We all make mistakes from time to time, right? As people, it's okay to make a mistake. But when we're looking for student spotlight students, we're looking for those students that really embody our school philosophy of kindness. So I'm going to start with Rebecca Gabriel. Would you like to come up with me? Come on. All right. And I know Miss P is here tonight too. Do you want to come up? All right. So from Miss P, you are an absolute joy to have in class. Your laugh is contagious and you brighten up the classroom. You love school. You follow directions. You're attentive, which means that you pay attention and you love to learn. And you always try your very best. You participate actively and you love to add to class discussions. And you show growth in all academic areas. That means in reading and in math and science and social studies. You always think of your friends and you're loving and caring. You're a wonderful friend and student. And Miss P loves having you in her class. She is so proud of you, and so am I. And a little bit about Rebecca from my vantage point. And what stands out to me about you, Rebecca, is your kindness and your empathy, which means how you treat others. Recently, when I was in the cafeteria, you saw that a classmate was upset. I think it was just last week. Do you remember that? You made it a point to try and calm him down, and you called other friends over to help him. You are a genuine student, and you really care for those around you. Rebecca, you embody our whole school expectation of kindness through your actions, what you do, your hard work, and for being a role model at Irving. So congratulations, Rebecca. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Next up, I have my friend Garrison. Would you like to come up and stand with me? Okay. All right, Garrison. So your teacher, Mrs. Parham, raves about you. She said you are kind, you're respectful, you're thoughtful, and you love to participate in classroom activities. Is that true? You're always the first to participate and you like helping your friends. She can count on you to know what's going on And if a friend is having a hard time, she can count on you to help them understand what those expectations are in the classroom. You also take your learning very seriously, and your smile can easily brighten someone's day. I agree. Definitely. So from the way I see you, Garrison, you always ask how my day is going. I always see you asking friends how their day is going. And when you come into the main office, you'll always say, "Hi, how are you?" That goes a really long way. And I'm super proud of you for that because it's not always easy. And you show a genuine interest, like you really do care how people feel. And you get along well with your classmates, and you have really awesome manners. I have seen you on the playground being a good friend, and you embody our whole school expectation of kindness as well. You help others, you model what kindness should look like, and you truly care, and you're really an awesome kid. So congratulations, Garrison. Thank you, everyone, again, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ms. McNally, and another round of applause for our amazing Irving Dragons. To the families and students, you're more than welcome to, and Ms. Papatakis and Ms. McNally, you're more than welcome to stay with us for the duration of the meeting. However, I know that you probably have other things to get to. So if you need to excuse yourself, please do. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next part of my report. So I know we've been talking a lot about a special ed program evaluation. So something that has been on our radar since probably the fall of last year. For those who understand our budget cycle, we have to budget in the fall for things for the following year. So for example, this year, we're working on our budget now for next year. So last year, we had begun discussions on looking at our district goals and department goals for our students in special education, making sure we're providing our students in a least restrictive learning environment that includes more inclusive education. So recently we were approved for Irving to be part of the inclusive project through the DOE. So we're all looking at that. In addition, there are many moving parts in special education, and I know I've talked about this several times in terms of the big buckets, which is programming, personnel, budget, compliance, classroom and office spaces, and resources. And so I know that especially our facilities has been on our radar too, in terms of making sure we can meet the needs of all of our diverse learners. So we are looking at having a fresh set of eyes on the special education department for those buckets to make sure, again, like I said, we're providing our students with the best resources and the best programming possible. So what I did was I reached out to the Middlesex County Superintendent's group, as well as other colleagues around the district, special education directors, special education teachers, other superintendents, boards of education, to find out, what are some highly recommended organizations or groups that are used for special education programming evaluations. It's an expensive evaluation that we want to get right. Sometimes just hiring a general group that does program evaluations in general, what we found is that if they don't really know the content for which they're evaluating, sometimes they miss the mark with what it is that we're really seeking. So this is a really expensive project that we want to get just right, because we want some of the information to inform our programming and in our decisions. So I reached out to colleagues and I got a couple of referrals. CPAG gave me 2 referrals, so I reached out to the one that would probably be the best in terms of what we were looking for. So I reached out to all of them. Of the 4 groups that I received information on, only 3 gave me proposals. So of those three, they went through my eyes, my special ed administrators and the Board of Education, and we talked about it probably for the past month and a half to 2 months, again, reviewing everything to get it just right. So based on that, we came to a conclusion. The Comegno Education Institute was the best proposal that would meet our needs and service the district. So I'm pleased to introduce the Comegno Education Institute. They have come to join us tonight to introduce themselves because, like I said, it's a big ticket item that's really important to our district with our evolving needs. So I'm grateful that they're here to introduce themselves. So I will pass the mic over. You can either go to the podium or if you want the wireless, because I know you like to move around and stuff like that. So it's up to you and your team. Would you like the podium or the wireless?
Your preference.
We come to a stalemate, whichever, it doesn't matter.
I'm decision fatigued.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you for that kind introduction. It's always dangerous when you give an attorney who's also a singer a microphone and tell him he can have the floor. Which? That's the question, not whether or what. Good evening, members of the board. Good evening, members of the community and administrators who are here. My name is John Comegno. With me from the Institute are my brilliant and accomplished colleagues, Doreen Babis, Dr. Sarah Bellotti. And I have to say, I don't know how many board meetings I've attended in 30 years of practicing education law. You closed your eyes when I said that, and I feel that I want to close my eyes when I say that. Meetings that begin honoring students and spending time talking about students and elevating student voice and talking about their accomplishments tell me, tell us, tell the world what kind of place this is. So congratulations. And I am, and my colleagues are very pleased to meet Rebecca and Garrison tonight. I particularly enjoyed the principal's comments about who they are as people. We'll talk a little bit about who we are. We'll talk a little bit about what our goals are. Your service on the board and to this community is aligned specifically with what we do and why we exist. And that is, to cut to the very quick, we're here to assist in improving instructional practices broadly. There is nothing more important today than public education. Nothing. And frankly, there's nothing more important than the accommodation of students with learning difficulties. Nothing. I've dedicated my entire career to special education in Section 504 accommodation, and most recently MTSS and intervention. And we look through the lens of different laws and different labels when we talk about disability accommodation, but the goal, frankly, is the same. And that is enabling learning. And enabling learning as intuitively and as richly and as broadly as we possibly can. Two of the most significant laws passed during our lifetime. First, the Education of All Handicapped Children Act, renamed the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. And 2 years before, the law that gets overlooked always, which I was lecturing about today, is the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which ensures access and accommodation for students that are not otherwise eligible under the IDEA. Whether we talk about 504 accommodation or IDEA modification in special education, the goals are the same. And that's enabling learning. And that's why we're here. And we'll talk a little bit about our proposal. We'll talk a little bit about what our goals are. But again, bottom line, we're here to assist and to ensure that student learning is happening most effectively and intuitively as it can be. My practice for 30 years as an attorney has concentrated in education law. I've lectured coast to coast. I've lectured in 25 or 26 states, but it's best to be home here in New Jersey. I established the Comegno Law Group about 20 years ago, and we began as a special education boutique, actually. We began as a special education boutique representing both parents and schools. Over time, because of positional conflicts, we focused on school work and institutional work, and we've grown to this point where we represent about 100 schools across the region. The institute, the consulting side of the house, is multidisciplinary, attorney lens and focus, as well as practitioner focus, special service directors, superintendents. We even have a former commissioner of the State Department of Education in our ranks. And our goal, multidisciplinary, is to look at how we address learning difficulty, not to save a nickel, not to reduce staffing, to ensure that we are doing right by our students and enabling learning through whatever lens that we are gazing. Again, be it IEP, be it 504, be it MTSS, or INRS, or RTI, whatever we might want to call it. That's a little bit about me and my goal and my perspective. A little bit about the Institute. I want to introduce Ms. Doreen Babbis. She's going to make a couple of comments about her experience, and then I'll talk more broadly about our proposal.
Good evening, everybody. It's so nice to be here. I really appreciate the time to be here in Highland Park and to get to share with you my experiences. So I am currently working in Pascack Valley Regional High School District. I am the Director of Personnel and Pupil Services. It's a new position for me. I have been the Director of Special Services for the last almost 10 years in 2 prior districts, Summit Public Schools, K through 12 district, and the Clark Public Schools before that. I started in Clark as a special ed teacher, and I moved on to the child study team as a learning consultant, and then as a special ed administrator, and then moved to Summit 6 or 7 years ago. I am in this field because I care about students first. I am a strong advocate for students, and as John said, it is not about saving money. It is about, for me, what's right for kids. And that means that we look at data and we use data to drive our decisions. We consult with our teams, our teachers, our parents, and we determine what the needs are of our students. I've created many different special education programs over the years. I have had other districts come and look at our programs. I have had other districts pay money to come and have their students come to our programs. And that has always been a source of pride for me, because what is better than that, than my colleagues coming and saying, your program is doing it right. You spoke about inclusive opportunities. I have brought unified sports to both districts that I worked in before. So unified sports allows an opportunity for students with disabilities and general ed students to play together. Soccer, basketball, bowling. I know in Pascack Valley, we have the same thing. It's an amazing experience for all who participate. Also involved in an inclusion pilot in Summit with the New Jersey Department of Education. So brought that over a few years ago. Love the right of students, whenever it's appropriate for them to be learning with their peers, learning with their gen ed peers. I've been very involved in intervention and referral services in MTSS over the years, and I feel that we can bring so much value to districts to just share our experiences and to look at programming, what's going really well, and where there might be some suggestions, recommendations that we can share based on our experiences to your district. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward, I hope, for future work with you. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, Dr. Bellotti.
Yeah. So I want to just briefly mention to piggyback on that. What I'm bringing to this process primarily is using a research lens to look at developing protocols to make sure that every voice is heard. And so that includes board members, that includes administrators, that includes parents. I see parents on both sides here. And that also includes students. And so, helping to think about how can we make sure that voices are heard, that we are taking into account maybe voices that are otherwise sometimes quiet, making sure that we're reaching all learners, all parents, and all stakeholders in the process to ensure that we have a very well-rounded picture of the special ed process and programs, and also the process and programs leading up to special education, including intervention referral as well as 504. So just wanted to kind of make a mention of that and talk a little bit about the importance of that stakeholder feedback in this process, because it's a combination of on-site and document and archival reviews, conversations, but it's also a formalized protocol looking at stakeholder feedback to get that information from everybody as to what their perspective is on the programming here. So thank you.
Thank you. Our proposal, which sounds like has been reviewed very closely, and thank you for that, and thank you for your kind words about it, is not looking through the narrow lens of IEP. It's not looking through the narrow lens of 504 or MTSS. It is a broad, rich proposal to look at instructional practices. It's to look at how we accommodate difficulty, how we enable learning, and to my colleagues' comments, to permit data to drive that process so that we can come back and share with you what our thoughts are, what is working phenomenally, and what ideas we have to improve. We will host stakeholder meetings, both live and Zoom. We'll have face-to-face meetings. We will have surveys. We're going to look at documents. We're going to provide every forum we can so that, as Dr. Bellotti mentioned, voices do not go unheard. I'd like to begin by meeting with parents, by meeting with CPAG in particular, and hear their thoughts. But again, we're going to look broadly at various stakeholders so that we can come back to you and offer our suggestions. We are flattered that you are validating our voices and our thoughts and our proposal. We look forward to working together to elevate student voice and to ensure that we're addressing difficulties as effectively and as intuitively as we can. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, John, and your team for introducing yourselves and giving us a broad outlook on your proposal.
This is a pretty long introduction, wasn't it?
It wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
We've had longer ones. So we have been a unique board in that 3 of us are special education teachers or have been involved in special education. 5 of us currently work in education.
That's awesome.
Several of us have students with disabilities that receive or have received services. And all of us are committed to creating the best learning environments that we can, because we want our students to have the most access they can to this rich, rigorous learning that meets their needs, right? So we have a very critical eye when we're looking at this. And we were hoping that you could give some examples of work that you've done with districts through the program evaluation work that you've done that kind of illustrate how you've been able to help districts enhance practices or improve outcomes for students there.
What a great question. I'll offer my thoughts and then I'll turn to my colleagues. I think it's important to keep in mind, and the educators on the board, I think, will recognize this, that when districts silo resources, there are winners and losers. And it's important to look through a broad lens, making sure that all are resourced as readily as they can be. Some of the work that we've already done here in Highland Park with regard to MTSS, I think, is an example of that. Looking at and getting on the same page with what resources are available across the different buildings at Tier 1, what is the difference between tier 1 and tier 2. What does tier 2 mean different from tier 3? Reinforcing that INRS is not a so-called life sentence, but making sure that we're resourcing faculty to know what services, programs are available for students is important. I think that's one example. Ms. Babis and I are working on a project right now in another county where we're looking at some disparity in service with regard to eligibility. And a misunderstanding of what eligibility means and is can lead to odd results and unfair results. And our chief educator talks about least restrictive environment. Least restrictive environment is not just here. Students have certain rights that are protected under federal law to receive services in the classroom. Again, getting to this thought of siloing. And Doreen and I are working to address that disparity as we speak in another place right now. I think those are a couple of examples. Anything you want to add?
So one of the first steps of the process would actually be to meet with these various stakeholder groups to identify the why. I like to call it the why, but really we're identifying sort of what are the problems that people are seeing, whether real or perceived, and then we would actually focus our process around some of those priorities. And so what I mean by that is that sometimes what will come up and what will surface through some of the surveys or some of the in-person sessions or Zoom sessions are thematic problems that are stated as a problem. And then we would sort of use that data to look to see what's the problem behind that statement. And I'm kind of shortcutting like a very big process, but really we're thinking about there's perception, there's reality, and then we want to make sure that we're prioritizing both the perceived and real problems that are sort of identified by the first step of the process, which would be the larger gathering of stakeholder input. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that as how we would set our priorities. And part of that would also be with talking with your senior admin team, with board members, and then looking at, all of the stakeholders, what are the comments that are coming up from there. And so then looking at making recommendations, highlights, because the other thing that we will include in our final executive summary would be highlights of the district that we've found through the process, as well as looking at various recommendations and suggested outcomes. So those priorities are going to be really driven by the conversations that we have right at the beginning. That's a good question.
Anyone else have questions? Dan?
So, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate your proposal. I think just hearing from parents and whatnot, I think we're really comfortable with the legal side of it, with the kind of reviewing the processes and whatnot. Can you give us a sense for how you evaluate programming, educational services, instruction, and the quality that's provided?
Absolutely. And I will respond. And then I'm also going to look to Doreen to respond further. Our proposal notes probably 2 or 3 dozen best practice issues, which are not just, I would refer to as compliance, but practice. And when we talk about special education, and I don't want to focus too much on special education because this focus is broad. The analysis is broad. But special education is driven by federal law and regulation, which then informs practice, as you know. We talk about an eligibility criteria, which is set forth in law. But what are the measures that our child study team is using that are consistent with that criteria? And how readily are we using them? What do they look like? What do those assessments look like? When we're reaching out from not just an annual perspective, but a much more regular perspective in capturing progress and feedback. As you know, those words have legal connotation, but they're driven by practice. So law, regulation, compliance really goes hand in hand. And our analysis is going to climb very practically and specifically into the day-to-day life of disability accommodation across these three different vehicles. So we're grounded in law and reg, but really informed by practice to make sure that that practice is consistent. Would you like to offer some more, please? Please.
So not to continue to drive this point home and beat a dead horse, but it really is about talking to teachers and parents and child study team and administrators. Are people happy? Are people feeling like their students are making progress? Do we look at that when we want to evaluate the success of our programs? And that's the big bulk of that work. It is looking at data. It's not just about, are the teachers happy and our parents happy, but are the students making progress? We can look at students who are moving from restrictive to less restrictive environments. That's progress to me. We can look at, are students getting declassified, or is special education their lifelong journey, which sometimes it is. Sometimes students need those supports for their academic career. But when we talk about progress, we look at how they're moving forward on that path. And so that's one of the things that we would look very closely at when we're evaluating the programs here at Highland Park.
And I'll follow up on that with just a couple of comments. And I mentioned this in a 504 webinar that I delivered today. And that is, I often ask practitioners, who knows the disabled student best? Who knows the disabled student best? Parent and student. Who knows the educational impact of those difficulties best? Likely teacher, who spends hundreds, sometimes thousands of hours working with and accommodating that student. We look through the lens of person, process, progress, regardless of the vehicle. Person, process, progress. We can put different labels on vehicles, but when it comes down to it, and the most important practice issue is, what are the needs? And how are we objectively capturing needs? How are we objectively identifying needs? What, to my colleague's comment, data is reinforcing what those needs are. Because if we don't begin from the point of needs, everything we do thereafter likely maybe going down a side road and not the main road. But if we're addressing the real need, then plugged into a compliant process, a consistent process, which is important. And we're going to look at that building to building to building, because we're not a regional high school. We're not a K-6 to a K-8, right? So we've got transitions, objective need into person, compliant process, and then that third point, which I touched upon and Doreen touched upon, progress is the word of the day. How do we define FAPE? U.S. Supreme Court defines FAPE as progress consistent with circumstance. That's the special ed FAPE. How do we define that with 504? How do we define that meaningfully with INRS? Progress, which is where I began my comments tonight. It's about learning, right? Progress is just another, maybe more sterile word for learning. Person, process, progress. What else?
I have a question. Thank you for your presentation. And I do feel like what I'm hearing is a very comprehensive, holistic approach that you take. I think my question is to sort of add a little bit more specificity to Allison's question. And that is, I'm sure you've done your research on our district. We're a small district, but highly diverse in terms of our racially, socioeconomically. What is our percentage of students now on free and reduced lunch? 40%. So we have students in our district that are, multiply dealing with multiple identities, right? That may be impacting their experiences here. And so I don't know the extent to which you have experiences with districts that are similar to ours in that respect. If you do, I would like you to speak to that if you can a little bit in terms of how, and if not, how you would factor in this context into the, outstanding work that you already have done respectively.
The answer is yes.
Oh.
The answer is yes. And I'm going to look to Dr. Bellotti to further answer. And thank you for that very informed question.
Sure. So I think that really going back to the idea of student first and looking at how are we making sure that voices are heard. And one of the first conversations I think we would have when we're setting up the surveys and the stakeholder groups would be conversations with Dr. Seska to make sure that we are appropriately accommodating parents who maybe don't have English as their first language, looking at how do we make sure that parent voices are heard who maybe are not inclined to be able to jump on a Zoom if they're working. We'll do, and typically what we would do is look at scheduling for different times. We can work with the administration to see if we even want to do, we're working with a district right now where they actually offered transportation and babysitting services, as well as snacks for the kids. So looking at for the kids, yeah, it was, that's why I was like for the kids. I mean, I guess maybe there were snacks for the adults, but specifically snacks for the kids. But really kind of trying to think about what could the community need be, and how can we not just assume that a parent is going to make themselves available at our convenience, and really thinking about how do we reach those needs. I imagine that there are already processes in place school by school to help communicate with and address parents. We would capitalize on those existing pathways, and then we would brainstorm on ways to make sure that those voices are heard. The other thing that we would be looking at is, 40% free and reduced lunch, very diverse student population. It still comes down to, are those students' needs being met? And how are we showing that? And so and this is also a little bit of an answer to another question earlier, part of this also is looking at what outcomes are being measured, how are they being measured, and how are they being communicated back? So sometimes some of the outcome of a program audit like this are really looking at, you have these great things going on here, but they're not being appropriately, I shouldn't say appropriate, that's a bad term. They're not being adequately communicated either back to staff, back to administration, back to the board, or back to parents. So some of it could actually be, looking at outcomes as well as communication. But really kind of coming back to, students, like this is all about addressing student need, looking at whether or not student needs are being met, and whether or not those outcomes are being measured in a way that makes sense for the community. Is that what you were kind of getting at, or is that a follow-up, or?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Sarah, did you have a question?
All right, I have a question. Just saying, I really did appreciate reading this as someone who gets to look at program evaluations all the time. It's part of what I do. And I will say, like, I really enjoyed the level of detail that you
Thank you.
had.
Thank you.
That is kind of appropriately, I think, balancing what is needed to kind of articulate. And so I think it's good to speak to that for those that are less familiar with kind of what would go into a proposal like this, because part of the balance is understanding kind of high level what the goals are, but then going through your discovery phase to really customize it to meet our needs. And so I think you appropriately balance that. So if you could speak a little bit more for those who don't get to read program evaluation proposals all the time, I think that would be helpful for those listening.
Thank you. And you think it would be helpful for us to talk about steps of our process or identify some of the issues we're going to be looking at?
I think a little more about potentially the process part, just to say, we have a proposal.
Yes.
And there's a process to kind of take that and make it your own.
Yes.
So we can kind of achieve our goals collectively. So how do we get there? And what does that look like? I think that could be helpful.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Sure. And we have identified across these three different categories, 3 phases. So there's 9 steps overall, if you will. We've identified practice issues. And again, I mentioned there are several dozen in the special ed context and the Section 504 context, various issues that we want to look at. With regard to MTSS, there are not dozens because we've already done a fair amount of work and we're really looking longitudinally. And I'm really proud of myself for pronouncing that word correctly at 10:08 on Monday night of this holiday week. So I'm not going to say it again. We're going to look at where we are after a year and a half of work up to this point. Special education. We have identified those best practice issues. We're going to begin by talking to folks. We're going to begin by establishing As both Sarah and Doreen mentioned, certain stakeholder groups that we want to meet with. We're going to meet with some groups in person. We're going to offer as well meetings via Zoom. Those stakeholder groups are going to be faculty, they're going to be staff, they're going to be child study team. They're going to be at some point the board, administration. Importantly, they're going to be parents. They're going to be interested group of parents and perhaps some select students if there is supportive parents to meet with students. We've had recent student meetings in another district where we're doing some analysis, and frankly, it was the best part of our time up to this point, meeting with students and hearing their voice. We're going to meet with those stakeholders. We are going to launch surveys across those stakeholders with specific questions that are going to drill down into those best practice issues. We're going to collect documents that may shine a light into those issues. Those documents, some of what I referred to before, may involve protocols, may involve assessments, may involve IEPs and 504s, may involve progress reporting, may involve other information that will assist us in understanding what implementation is and is not, how consistent it is and is not, what do referrals look like, what does reassessment, triennial or otherwise, look like. And then when we collect all that data, that's phase one. Phase two, we're going to look at it and analyze it. We'll look at it both quantitatively, objectively, as well as subjectively. That may lead to some additional follow-up that will assist us also then going into the third phase, which will be our recommendations, perhaps involving some assistance in creating new process, sharpened process, development of forms if needed. And we're going to complete this with professional development. And I think that's important because the task here, as I mentioned before, is not to show up here a certain number of months into the future and say, this is what you need to do. We're here turnkeying with a comprehensive proposal to be part of the implementer as to our recommendations and suggestions, and then to land that plane with professional development, involving whoever might be involved, faculty, staff, administration, et cetera. Phase one, phase two, phase three. That's what it looks like for IDEA, IEP, and 504. With regard to MTSS, INRS, we're going to see where we are longitudinally, and we then may provide some additional follow-up PD. We may provide some additional meetings. We're going to make sure that we're achieving the goals that we set out before.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think one thing I'm curious about to kind of drill down a little more is this kind of mixed methods approach, really holistic. But what happens, in a situation where you're getting differing kind of inputs, and how do you reconcile that? And maybe this is kind of theoretical, but I think that from the research perspective, I'd be curious about how you handle that kind of information when it doesn't quite, where it's not consistent or there's differing kind of viewpoints.
When one person says X and another says Y?
A person or a data point, or,
Yeah.
There's a lot that you're going to be reconciling both
Yeah.
on the quantitative and qualitative side. So I think it'd be
Fascinating.
good to-
So I'll respond and then I'll let you give the right answer. The researcher. We will staff this with at least two of us. So we have legal lens and practitioner lens throughout, if not three of us, which I think at times gives some validity to the process and gives us some sense of what to put weight on and perhaps what to put less weight on. But I will turn to you, Doctor, to answer in a more sophisticated way.
That was a good answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very well done. What I was actually going to say also to add to that, because that is an important component. In the past, when we've had discrepancies, we try to go back to the primary source. And so, for example, if we can look at things like IEP documents, if we can talk to building leadership about what they're seeing in their formalized observations, if we can talk to students about what their actual experience has been. So it really, I think a lot of times we can come to an understanding by kind of trying to figure out where that primary source is, identifying the primary source, and then evaluating that source right from the start. Because invariably, there will absolutely be different perspectives on this. And so it's really looking at what those perspectives are. But I think sometimes when you see differing opinions or differing I don't want to say perspectives again, but when people are coming at the same issue from very different sides, sometimes that in and of itself is a problem that then we would look to actually identify the root of that problem. A lot of times it's communication. But, you know, looking at how do we better define what that problem is to help people be aligned? Because one of the outcomes of this obviously is student achievement, but also is making sure that those perspectives become more aligned would be one of our goals of the process. But that's a great question.
Great, thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for those great questions, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, John, and thank you to the team. We really appreciate it. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, we're going to move on to public comment. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and has reserved this time for your comments. Board policy number 0167 establishes and regulates the right of the public to participate in public meetings. We'll start with people who are in person for public comment, and then we'll move to people on Zoom for public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment in person?
Hi, I'm Kristen Springer of 423 Dennison Street.
Hi, I'm Selma Bakery, 433 River Road.
We'll write it down from here. We're the co-chairs of CPAG, and we're really happy to be here as CPAG representatives. We have a whole thing we were going to say, but I also want to reflect on what you presented. So I really appreciate your presentation. It was thoughtful and thorough, and we both really appreciated that. And as I think you all know, we're excited about the evaluation. We think it presents a great opportunity to strengthen the services here and to also think about areas where we could make improvements. And we're really excited about that. We were a little bit worried at first because it seemed like Comengo focused more on the law piece, right? And if you look at the kind of the website, it looked more kind of litigation focused, and we were more concerned about that, but we're delighted to hear more about the educational piece. And so, you know, we would love to hear even more about that, kind of what your education background is. I think that would be really useful. And also thinking about cases where we might need a specialist. Like one thing that a lot of the parents in our group have struggled with is dyslexia. And so I don't know, in those cases, it would be interesting to hear if you bring in a dyslexia expert, for example, if that's not something that you guys are particularly qualified in. I think that would be an important thing for us to, you know, for people to know kind of what experts do you bring in if we need that. Yeah, and we appreciated you talking about work that you've done before, but it would also be helpful to see if it's publicly available, other reports that you've produced. I mean, we've, you know, Dr. Suska said that we recommended, or we've referred to some other consultant groups that had reports, and part of it was useful for us to see kind of the outcome, and that's nice. It's good for us to see that just to understand, but also it helps us get a sense of what's going on. You know, we're parents. We don't necessarily understand how it's supposed to look. And it's in some ways easier to understand that when you see it from the backside to how it comes forward. So I don't know if that would be, if you had that from other places, but I think that would be really useful information for everybody to have. It would also be really great. And I think you did this, but I can't quite get my head around it. Talk a little about the parameters of what you're looking at. I mean, are you instructed to only look at certain areas? Are you told, let's look at everything special ed? What leeway do you have to focus on certain areas, or are you restrained to certain topics? I think that's really important. And I should say, you know, we say this as wanting to be collaborative partners in benefiting the kids, and we know that the board does as well. So we're offering these ideas and questions in that lens. We also were noticed that a substantial portion of the proposal focuses on 504 accommodations and that kind of prior process. And we were curious about that because we had understood from prior conversations that special ed did not include the MTSS and the INRS and the 504. That was a distinction that I think was made. And so curious how much of the focus is on special ed, because part of what our families are struggling with is that the special ed piece, once you're classified or getting classified, and not the piece before that. And there's some concern among some of the parents in our group that part of this might be to shift kids from the special ed classification to the non-classified kind of earlier process. And so I think we were surprised to see that a good portion of the focus was on the prior special ed piece. And I think that would be useful to talk about and to understand. We would also love to learn more about the results and when they would be made public and what access the public would have to those. And related to that, the proposal references the findings and recommendations from you said, I think, a 1.5 year long MTSS program evaluation. Are those results available? And if they're not publicly available, why are they not publicly available? And what does that mean in terms of the parents and the community's confidence that we would be able to get access to the results when this evaluation is done? So I think those are important pieces of information to have available as well. And it would be interesting too, given that you're a lawyer, to understand what part of, if there's any attorney-client privilege in play here, that you don't have to divulge some information because you're a lawyer working with the district as them as your client. So I think that would be useful to think about as well. And then you touched on this and we really appreciate it. You centered parents and that was beautiful. And I guess we would love to, and we'll learn more about kind of how parents are involved in the process. And also, you know, someone brought up a question, I think Sarah did, about what happens if you have different viewpoints. You know, and from a parent's point of view, you know, you wonder, what if the parents say one thing and the district says another? How do you adjudicate that? You're not paid by us, you're paid by the district. And so I think that's an important part for us to think about, and it would be useful in terms of, you know, full collaboration for us to understand that as well. And then finally, we wanted to bring up the possibility of possibly having a community listening session with other parents. I mean, we didn't find out about this proposal or the choosing of this group until Friday at 2 o'clock. That's not a lot of time to get people together to think about this. We talked about how we have 40% of our population are multiply marginalized, right? The people here, we got CPAG, a good group of CPAG people here, but the people who can be here on short notice and get stuff together are a distinct group. And I think for this to really work for our diverse population and from an equity perspective, I think it'd be really useful if there was an opportunity before a vote, before this is solidified, to have a place for a larger group of parents to be able to have a communication with you and with the board about what this entails. Anything you wanted to add? Okay, so thank you very much. And thank you guys for taking this so seriously.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next, yes, go ahead. No.
I tried to write and talk last time. And that I was okay. Thank you, board, for allowing me to comment, and thank you to the presenters. It was a very helpful presentation. Just a couple of comments. Firstly, on transparency, which, you know, everyone I'm sure recognizes that's really important. We've heard a lot about the process. The proposal talks about some of the outputs being written summaries and recommendations. So I'm interested to know more about that actual process of drafting a report and then it becoming final. So I actually think I'm looking to the board, who would have to ask the question, but there'll be a draft report. I assume that will go to the superintendent, maybe special ed department, I'd like to ask, will the board have some visibility of that draft? And I ask because I wouldn't want a draft to get any change in emphasis, some things elevated, some things removed. Strongly urge that the board insists that you have visibility of any drafts and until it gets final. And perhaps that could be one board member who is designated to sit on any reviews of drafts. So that, I guess that's a question idea and a request. Anyway, then I'm interested, I did a little bit of online looking at your educational institute. And so I am interested how you keep that separate from the law practice. I understand Dr. Bellotti and Dr. Babbis, you have full-time jobs, I think. So this is presumably just extra consulting or something. So I'm trying to understand, so I'm putting words to it, but I'd rather you say, is it all consultants that you use for the Educational Institute, or do you pull on some full-time staff from your law practice as needed to do some of the work? I think I'd love to hear from Mr. Kamengo, or if you guys are able to ask. Thank you. Let me think if I've got anything else. No, just again, I do appreciate the presentation, and I appreciate that the board are, looking to get this evaluation up and running. Thanks.
Thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll just, I'm going to take a list of simple things that we can have Mr. Kamengo, quickly address at the end of public comment. And then anything more lengthy, Dr. Nicosia, oh my gosh. Dr. Siska is taking extensive notes that we can share, and the team can reach out to you to address the questions as well. Okay, anybody else in person?
I've never done this process, but Elisa Zatrowski, 314 Montgomery Street. I really appreciate your presentation. I'm both a parent and a member of CPEG, and I'm actually really enthusiastic about the opportunity to improve our special education services. I really appreciate that this is something our district is taking so seriously and we're making such a big investment in. I do have some concerns about the process that we've gone through to select this firm. Not your personal process, but just the lack of transparency. I feel like it's a big investment. It's a $50,000 investment that we've done with no RFP. And basically, as a group, we found out about this on Friday because we saw it in the board agenda. And there's really been no time for parents to ask questions or for us as a community to engage in more of a dialogue about this. So I think that was a really missed opportunity to create more transparency and have a more inclusive process. And I think that's really important for our community, just as a value. I also know that the proposal and today's presentation referenced this MTSS evaluation, but I've never seen any public findings or reports from that evaluation. So I would love to hear more about what recommendations were made, any changes that resulted from that work. I think would really help us understand this process more. And also just clarity on the district's plans to release those findings, whether this project will be different and the community will be able to hear findings from this project and how things are changing. But again, I would love to see if we move forward with this firm that we might have a more transparent process going forward and things shared. I really appreciated how much you guys talked about your educational expertise and background, because I personally found like there was a lot we could find about the legal side. And obviously a lot of us as parents really care about that educational expert. I would second kind of what Kristen said, that it would be great to hear, like, are there times when you bring in outside expertise, like with dyslexia? Are there areas where you really find kind of masters in their field who really know these areas better, or how do you address them when things are really specialized? I'm also interested in, I know, as I said, when you look online, we can see a lot about your legal work. There's a lot less about the consultancy work. And I know when we looked at other districts and other firms, we could find reports. So I would be really interested in seeing examples of reports that you've done for other districts, and the types of recommendations you've made. And I'd also be interested to hear, are there ever times when you recommend an expansion of services? So I know, sometimes it's like 504s, and I know you even referenced this idea of, oh, if people are becoming declassified, that represents progress. But I could see another scenario where students progressing and being declassified, but then not getting services they need could be not progress. So I would just love to hear about other kind of evaluations you've done, and if you have examples where you've actually recommended expanded services or different kinds of services. Was really pleased. I will note that how much thought you've put into how to include parents. So I definitely want to highlight that. And I really hope that if we move forward with this firm, that both the firm and the board really ensures that we get more parent engagement going forward. I know one thing, because I know we all have a huge commitment to equity, the idea that this being released so last minute, I know it's sort of like more advantaged parents that are able to come in the room and respond and give their thoughts. And obviously, a lot of us have children in special ed. That's why we're here. But there are lots of parents that aren't as advantaged, don't have the same kind of access to input, don't know about like reading board agendas or finding this stuff. And so I think it's really important that however we move forward, we make sure that there's real outreach even beyond CPAG. Like we are one group of parents, but I think there's a lot more parents that are affected by having children with special needs. And so that's really important outreach. I would personally request that we pause on the vote and actually take more time to get community engagement and give the community a chance to ask questions. And I believe moving forward that there are more transparent, better ways that we could really collaborate. Either way, I'm really excited that we are undertaking this work. And I'm really excited just as a member of CPAG, but also as a parent to really collaborate and participate in this project. Thank you.
Okay, next member.
Hi, Abby Stern Cardinal. I live on Harper Street. I'm not sure that I have a question for anyone as much as just like highlighting something that could be a challenge and just kind of looking at all of this. I don't have kind of anything specific prepared, but something that a couple people have said is that in my experience and what other people have also shared is special education as a term, at least in this district, and I don't know how it works elsewhere, is only uses IEPs, I believe. And I could be wrong about certain terminology, but you talked about silos, and I think you're incredibly right about that. As parents, it's incredibly difficult to navigate kind of the different areas where there's certain people that deal with IEPs. There's certain people that deal with 504s. And obviously there's also an INRS team. I don't know much about MTSS, but presumably I don't know if they're the same people or different people. And so one big concern I have, and again, this isn't really a question, it's just highlighting a kind of big issue in this area. And the report or the proposal kind of talks about it holistically, which is great, but I don't really understand how it can be looked at holistically in the structure of the district as it exists when the district is so siloed as it is. So when we speak with staff, teachers and staff, and they provide such a distinct, they won't speak beyond a certain line, and you can't get people in the same room who are from two different areas. How do we go forward with a proposal, or just any proposal, not this one, but any proposal that has them so integrated when there's such a clear distinction in this district? And I believe in other districts, but I don't know for sure. In terms of like a personal example, if we're asking for something from one, like they say that's not my area, and then the other also says it's not my area. And so how are we going to get people to work together to look at this holistically, as you've said?
All right, anybody else in person? Okay, we're gonna go to Zoom comments. How many people, Angelo, do we have on Zoom? Is anybody on Zoom for public comment? You can raise your hand. No hands. Okay. Mr. Kamengo, if you could quickly just clarify the law group versus the consultancy for us. Yes, yes. So we're going to close public comment. Thank you for the reminder. We're going to close public comment. Do you want to do the rest of the meeting?
We do have an extra mic.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yes.
Sure, yeah.
May I? Thank you. First of all, thank you for your incredibly thoughtful and smart comments, and also the very courteous and respectful way in which you shared them, which frankly, I'm not surprised from the meeting up to this point in our time here in the district to date. There is boundary between Comegno Law Group, which is my law firm, and Comegno Education Institute, which is our consulting firm. And the firm that is being appointed tonight is the consulting firm, not the law firm, just so that we're clear. So there is an attorney who works for both, happens to be president of both proudly. But the board is entertaining a proposal from the consulting firm, which contains an attorney and many, many educational practitioners, not a law firm, number one. Number two, if I can, I loved your comments about progress and what is progress. Progress is learning. Progress is not being declassified or receiving this versus that. Progress is intuitively, efficiently, and as close to the moment enabling learning. That's our perspective. That is our perspective with regard to MTSS, INRS. It's our perspective with regard to IEP and 504 as well. The comment about what is MTSS versus INRS, MTSS is INRS, so you're spot on. MTSS is just an acronym that stands for multiple tiers of student support, and intervention and referral services does that. With regard to the questions about disability-specific expertise, yes, we have individuals within the Institute that have different areas of expertise, such as dyslexia, where we could look at certain scientific research-based methods of learning. We could look at certain supports. We could look at what's scientifically research-driven, validated as far as by whom that support is delivered, in what frequency and what duration, at what level. And to the extent that we need to bring those folks into the analysis, we will. The same holds true with autism and various methods to provide analysis as to what are the functional impacts of autism. Or when we look at individual students that might have the disability label of multiple disabilities, the same with behavioral difficulties. So we've got those folks, and to the extent we need to bring them to the table, we will. There was a very frank question about whether or not our task is to look at declassifying, and that's not our task. That has not been stated to us, to be frank. Similarly, there have been no parameters given to us in this review other than to look at instructional practices and to look at how disability vehicles are used in the district, which is why we speak so-called holistically. And that is our perspective. Madam President, anything else you'd like me to address?
I think that covers most of it.
Thank you.
If you have additional questions, obviously you can send them, if you want to send them through CPAG. We did talk about at the CPAG meeting, having another round of questions submitted for Dr. Suska to send to the team, or you can also email any follow-up questions to the board. And Dr. Suska will also go through her notes and pull out any questions that maybe we have missed, and we will get to those as well. So thank you very much. We appreciate your I don't know, I lost my thought. We appreciate you adding on to your already extensive presentation. We're going to move on to committee reports. I'm going to start with curriculum and instruction. Curriculum and instruction met on November 14th. It was a very big meeting. We had Dr. Suska, Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Donovan, Ms. Asamoah, me, Dan, Jen, and Sarah. So we have some exciting news. We're going to have new courses in science at the high school. So astronomy for space science is a new course that's it was presented for review. This one we're going to table for now. We're going to look at it in a little bit. And that is because we may already have an existing course that covers some of that content. So they're going to look to see if those two courses could perhaps be combined and to be a new course to be astronomy and space science. We're also looking at AP Computer Science principles. The committee reviewed a proposal for this course designed to attract underrepresented students in STEM fields. Dr. Donovan discussed the success of this course in Princeton, where it was offered to ninth graders as an introductory computer science option. The committee discussed the importance of intentional recruitment strategies and collaboration with school counselors and math and science teachers. There are also going to be two new Spanish courses up for approval: Culture and Civilization 1, España and America del Sur, and Culture and Civilization 2, Mexico y America Central. And the committee reviewed those proposals, and they are focused on oral proficiency and cultural aspects. And this is really to kind of broaden how students can access language instruction for the students that may struggle with traditional grammar-focused courses. So some of our students with disabilities or dyslexia who may need to explore language through oral comprehension, while also looking at the cultural aspects of different nations and regions. So these courses would run every other year. So 1 year would be one set of countries and areas, and the next year would be another set, but they would not be consecutive. So we asked them to remove the 1 and 2 from the names. We discussed the history of midterms and finals at the high school, which were discontinued during the pandemic. Some staff members support reintroducing midterms and finals to better prepare students for post-secondary assessments, while others expressed concerns about the impact on pacing and the need for more engaging and knowledge-building assessments. The committee supported the reintroduction of midterms and finals, but agreed that any reintroduction should be really carefully implemented and accompanied by study skills support for students. Ms. Rodriguez shared feedback from staff on the use of AI in education, noting mixed opinions and interest in platforms like ChatGPT, Magic School AI, and Copilot. You okay?
Oh, yeah. No,
Okay. The committee discussed plans to offer a session at the district's January professional development to introduce AI and its potential uses in the classroom. We looked at curriculum revisions for health. Ms. Asamoah discussed updates to the health curriculum, including the integration of LGBTQ-related content and the expansion of personal and mental health topics. The group suggested adding references to resources on LGBTQ+ topics, such as Garden State Equity and Gilson. The committee expressed concern about the lack of a sexual health unit in 7th grade. There are sexual health units in 6th and 8th, but for some reason not in 7th, and the need for comprehensive coverage throughout middle school. The committee also revisited its discussion from earlier this year about prioritizing intervention during the school year and the possibility that the district may not be able to fund SHIP. Unfortunately, due to budget constraints, SHIP will not be funded this year. The committee discussed connecting with the library and town recreation program to discuss how these programs could respond in their programming to this information. We want to be very clear, this does not affect students receiving extended school year services. This is only for the SHIP program. So any extended school year services as provided through special education department will continue over the summer. We also looked at our field trips. So I'm going to switch over to our agenda items. So we have several field trips as per attached on the agenda. Some examples include the Rutgers Geology Museum, Super Fresh to look at organization of a grocery store, the Keene University for the DECA district competition, and the Atlantic City state competition. So those are some examples of some upcoming trips. We also have the approval of 2 HIB reports, HS 242501, which is unconfirmed, and HS 242502, which is confirmed. We have the approval of graduate student or students for teaching internship or junior practicum or observation for Miss Dana Collins from Seton Hall for speech to language. We have the approval of courses for AP Computer Science Principles, Cultural and Civilization for the 2 world language courses. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Quick question about the language courses. So did they remove the 1 and 2? That's in the agenda that way. Great.
Yeah, I realized I should have checked before I talked about them and should have left that out, but I forgot. All right, finance and facilities.
Equity and excellence.
Equity and excellence. Oh my gosh.
You
You know what? It's
such a good meeting.
finance and facilities is my break time.
Oh, there's a question.
I didn't say it fast.
Sorry.
And I just had a question about the language courses. Will they actually be teaching like in Spanish? Or is it like
Spanish?
it is actually,
Yes,
but
it's a
not
Spanish
just
course.
Spanish, like learning about it.
No,
but they
yeah,
actually
so
get
they're
to-
going to learn oral
They get to learn the
conversation.
Spanish too. Okay,
Yes,
that's
yeah.
great.
So it's more about the speaking and listening, conversational Spanish. So if students were like planning to travel and things like that, like what would get them through the, the trip and things that they can
That's
use
great.
in everyday life.
I have one more comment too. I'm sorry. Is it okay to bring up the class trip to the library? Or I'd really like to highlight that if that's possible. And I can.
Yes,
Okay.
and actually, I
I
think
just-
one of our student reps did too, right? Yes. Seth
Yeah, I'm
did.
just very excited. I'm very excited about
Yes,
that.
we do have a
I'm sorry
class
I
trip
missed
going
it.
to the library to get library
To go library.
cards,
I think that's
which is great. That's where I got my first library card, on a class trip to the library. Any other questions? Okay, equity and excellence.
Yes, Equity and Excellence met on the 21st, and the bulk of our meeting pertained to the RISE program evaluation report that was recently completed in 2 parts, the qualitative and quantitative portions of the report. And we had a special guest, Dr. Ann Gregory, who met with the committee to answer our questions and to share her perspectives and thoughts on the report, just through the lens of her being an experienced researcher and evaluator in the area of restorative practices and around discipline in schools. So another very robust discussion. So it's gonna take me a little bit to get through these thorough notes we have here. I think the initial feedback that Anne had for us as she reviewed the report was that she found the use of the word restorative in our program. RISE is restorative in school. What's the E for? Restorative in school experiences, sorry. Restorative in school experiences. That's what the acronym stands for. So, Anne, had some concerns about the use of the word restorative in the title of the program, just based on her read of the report and the fact that most schools who have a restorative program have a more comprehensive model, not just an in-school suspension model. So she emphasized the importance of just making that distinction and understanding that the bang for the buck when it comes to restorative practices is in prevention. So really focusing on prevention. She talked about the best way to prevent and reduce school discipline inequities, which is, something that we struggle with, as do many districts around this country. And these discipline inequities that disproportionately impact students who receive special education services, Black students, Hispanic, Latino students, and cisgendered males. She emphasized the importance of prevention when it comes to addressing those disproportionality issues. Districts who focus solely on kind of the higher end of restorative conferences and still find profound racial discipline gaps, for example, find that, what happens is race becomes still or actually continues to be a predictive factor in placing students at risk for suspension. So she just kind of gave us that context, again, based on her experience as a practitioner and a research in restorative practices. So her view of the report was that it was a report on our suspension data, not necessarily a report on restorative practices as a fully functioning sort of program. She talked about good things that are happening around harm reduction, social emotional learning, and therapeutic approaches in our program. But the concern is that, when the word restorative is used in programs, and districts don't see the kind of reductions in discipline, the number of suspension incidents, then restorative practices kind of becomes the bad guy and the fall guy. So she really just wanted us to be careful and be aware of that. And I think we've experienced that. We talked about that in the meeting, that we have experienced kind of this perception, I think, in the community and in the district level around restorative practices not sort of living up to what we had hoped. When in actuality, as Anne pointed out, we really haven't yet implemented a fully robust restorative practices program. So we talked about what that means in terms of the bottom line and just financially what the districts can afford in terms of improving our program. And that is really kind of what we all want to see. She talked about, Anne talked about thinking about the goal of the program, really talking about we do want to be serious about implementing restorative work fully. How can we better tie it into our tier 1 level of supports, school climate, the work we're doing around that, our SEL learning, all of these kind of tier 1 level supports and how we can make it more consistent with restorative practices. So we talked about, I guess she gave us just a little bit more context about other districts and used some really helpful examples of some of the districts she worked with who have fully implemented and kind of done deep training around restorative practices and have put in a lot of resources towards their programs. She talked about the data showing that restorative conferences do show that for very serious kind of safety threatening incidents, they've had success with reducing recidivism. But again, these are, she acknowledged, programs that have people that are dedicated at the central level and who go out to the different schools in the districts to really support school building level staff. So they really have a robust comprehensive program or programs in place to support the restorative work. So one of the recommendations that Anne, one of the recommendations in the report that Anne kind of also pointed out that she was a little bit concerned about was just the recommendation to kind of rotate volunteer teachers around to kind of supervise or monitor our RISE program, and the fact that our teaching force is already really stretched thin. So just thinking about kind of the human resources that we have and how we want to be careful to not spread those resources any thinner than they already are. And then that led to a conversation talking about kind of the relational component of a restorative practices program and how it is really important to find the staff who have the ability to engage and diffuse, conflict, teaching, being able to teach these practices and how important that is. She's like, we know that we have those teachers in our buildings, and it's really just identifying those teachers and really leveraging their skills and assets as we think about ways to improve our use of RP. She found that struggles with teacher training and classroom management came through in the report as an area of need. Our teachers, again, who are very skilled, are they being motivated and to really take leadership roles and leveraging their skills. She talked about also being careful to do this without shaming or blaming, but there's nuance into that as well. But the importance of really, again, leveraging who we already have here in our buildings. And that sort of led to talking about buy-in and how important that is. Anne pointed out there's absolutely accountability when it comes to restorative practices. It's not just kind of quote unquote soft on accountability or ineffective, but there is a lot of accountability that goes into kind of that face-to-face restorative work of acknowledging harm, working to repair it, and that deep work that it takes. So getting to, there's a lot here. I'm going to try to summarize it. I'm sorry, it's just so much and I don't want to leave out important details. One of the, I think, key recommendations that we talked about first, Anne talked about making sure that we're clear that we want to be careful about pairing traditional discipline approaches with restorative practices. That is something that came out in the report. We should really be focusing on accountability, learning, growth, and repair. Those are kind of the pillars that Anne emphasized. And so really focusing on those pillars is something that I think we all would buy into. So it's just building around that at that tier 1 level. So thinking about the fiscal restraints and where we are where that's concerned, Anne acknowledged it, but she also said that, again, impactful RP programs are the ones that have typically hired a full-time or part-time dean in each building to support this work. But thinking about budget conscious things that we could do that would have a high impact. We talked about let's see. First, what not to do. Anne said, do not focus on just doing district-wide trainings. Often post-training excitement is there, but then there's a lack of follow-through. So really trying to kind of not take this kind of district-wide approach when it comes to just having full out of one-off trainings or even a series of trainings and thinking that's going to carry the program. So really thinking about finding ways again to make this a part of our practice on a day-to-day building level and looking at culture. So one really useful suggestion she gave us was to think about perhaps picking a grade level or 2 grade levels and doing some articulation work around RP at an intense level with that grade level and see almost as a demonstration project and really grow from there. And using that particular demonstration project, quote unquote, to share out sort of the positive results, what's working really well, highlighting kind of the shares and the sharing and glowing, share and glows, spotlighting what's working well, bragging about the good. We talked a lot about that and really provided some helpful context in terms of other schools that she's worked with who have really found, I think it was one principal in Los Angeles who said that they had and this was a primarily Latino community, there were somewhere around 110 or so suspension, their average suspension rate was around 100 and something, under 115 for the year. And after developing a really robust RP program, but one that really focused on just highlighting their successes, they were able to get down their suspensions to like under 5 in a year, which is just amazing. But Anne really talked about how big part of their success is really talking about the successes, highlighting that and engaging families. So they really incorporated families and utilizing the relationships that the families had and capitalizing off of that. So we talked a little bit about that. When it comes to professional learning opportunities, professional learning communities came up in our discussion and how that could be leveraged to focus around discipline and equity, building trusting relationships, diffusing relationship problems. Taking a strength-based coaching model is another suggestion that Anne had, really thinking about, again, using those teachers and staff members that we already have to really boost and leverage the skills that we have in our buildings already. And then again, of course, leveraging student agency and their voice and really incorporating their voice in when we're thinking about our programming and how to improve it. So really, again, very comprehensive approach here. We found her insights to be very helpful, a heavy focus on culture and climate, and really allowing that to even when we're analyzing our culture and climate data to help us assess what's going well and what we need to improve. Let's see. I think this is repetitive, so I'm just going to pass here. I think I covered most of it. I will say at the ending here and acknowledged, as we all did, there are kids that we know need real skill building, and that's what this is ultimately about, is trying to work on developing skills in this process of repair and restoration and growth and learning. So she just really emphasized the important need for everyone in our community to develop those skills in that process. So we're looking forward to more conversations around this. I think we had a really robust conversation and opened up a lot of questions, and it will be, I think, important for us to really consider how do we take some of these suggestions into our practice in a way that we can afford to do as well. So, yes. Any questions? I know that was a lot, and Dr. Suska, are you going to be providing a presentation on the report here? I felt like that was supposed to happen. Maybe I got.
Yeah, you did a great job of presenting. Thank you.
Yeah. Context, and I thought about that. So I'm sorry because we didn't really give that broader.
That's okay. So I will be putting together a whole presentation. Actually, I'm going to couple it with another program evaluation that was done on our school guidance departments. So I figured both, because it's all about student support and services. So I'd like to couple both of those together. So I'm waiting for a revised version of the school counseling program evaluation that was done under with a consultant under Elizabeth Asamoah and under her leadership that she managed that with this, so that we can look at a broader picture also of all the things that we're doing for student support and areas that we want to continue to improve. Because I think, you know, for example, the school counselors do play a role in supporting students during RISE. So it's interesting, some of that sort of dynamic of what came out in that other program evaluation to say, well, if our school counselors, for example, are conducting our HIB investigations and running INRS meetings and things like that, do they have the time to be able to provide other student supports? And where areas can we kind of look at our school counselors and better utilize their strengths for student support? So I think they mirror each other really nicely. So I'd like to combine them both into a larger presentation that I'm hoping to give next month if I get everything in on time and put it together. Because I'd hate to wait for the end of January. That's so far away when we, in the grand scheme of things, because that would be the next meeting after. So my plan is the end of December. You're welcome.
Very good summary. Please. No, that was great.
Okay, we're going to move to finance and facilities.
So I reported out on our meeting at our last public board meeting, so I'm just going to look at the agenda and only comment on the things that are bold or new on the agenda, which there is many, as I predicted last 2 weeks ago. So under approval of professional services, we have an extensive additional list. One of them is the program evaluation that we talked about tonight with Comegno Education Institute. And then the others on the professional services list is for hiring of Invo Healthcare to provide related services as needed for occupational therapy, speech pathology, physical therapy, behavioral and a BCBA support and social work. So this would be on as needed. We would have them hopefully able to provide those services when we need them. And then we have the approval, I'm looking at number 4, approval of the bill list for October 29th to November 25th in the amount of $3,887,000 about. Approval of the treasurer's report as of September 30th. Approval of the board secretary's report certifying that as of September 30th, no budgetary line item has been overextended. Approval of the Board of Education certificates. I always forget which one this one is. Again, affirming that there are sufficient funds available to meet the district's financial obligations for the remainder of the year. Approval of budget transfers for the month of September. Approval of travel and related expense reimbursements for the 24-25 school year. Approval of contractors. Oh, this is for Camp Nijada, which is a PD workshop for nurses. And then QBS. So this is to bring in additional training for what we typically use Handle with Care for de-escalation and to help students with de-escalation and potentially restraint should that be needed. So this is a train the trainer model. So we'd be training administrator in-house who would then turn around and train staff in their de-escalation strategies. So that's the QBS. Then the next one here is approval of submission of the pre-kindergarten projected enrollments for the 25-26 school year, which, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, will be the same as we have this year. Approval of submission of health and safety checklist, statement of assurance for 24-25. Approval of waterproofing at Irving Primary School in the art room and in the music room via WTI Tremco is the company. Approval of the purchase of a compact cab tractor through our Pritchard equipment budget. Approval of steam tables. Oh, this is in the cafeteria at Irving. I'm thinking, what is that?
Yeah, not like steam, like.
It's not like STEM. I'm
I
thinking STEM.
know,
No, no,
not
steam.
STEM tables.
This is actually
Like
electric hot food,
food.
things that you heat food in, right? I was thinking educationally. Approval of disposal of cafeteria tables. Earlier in the year, we approved the purchase of new cafeteria tables, and now we have to approve disposal of the old ones. The next two items are donations. One is for a preschool program, for the preschool program, a climbing set. And the other one is classroom supplies for our high school science department. So we are appreciative of donations. Approval of bedside instruction for one student at Princeton House. And the last one, last but certainly not least, is approval of a DMR proposal for professional services. This is for the Bartle structural repairs we talked about a lot 2 weeks ago. This is really for the architectural work and construction management services in the amount of $176,100. Any questions?
Question,
Yeah.
so just to be clear, QBS LLC, the
Mhm.
safety care, so they are including restraint training or not? Is it just de-escalation with no restraint training, or sorry?
QBS, can you explain it?
Sorry, it's getting cold in here, so my nose is running. I'm getting, they're like chilling me out here. I'm getting cold, sorry. It's a combination, but what we like about their model, if you look online, is that the focus is more on crisis prevention and proactive strategies for de-escalation. If a restraint is needed, it has to be a combination for certification. So that is there, but their focus, what we like, is that it's more crisis prevention training. Where Handle with Care focuses more on the restraint, less on, not less, but like equal parts or something like that. Like if you do a full day training, it's like half day. But in this approach, it's more focused on the prevention and proactive measures.
And then my other, I guess questioning, I think just, so on the Comegno Education Institute, a vote here. If I'm not mistaken, we did not include a discussion on this in our workshop meeting. Is that correct? Or did I miss something? In terms of.
Anything bold?
Oh, it's bold because it was added to the agenda. We've been talking
That's
about it,
what I
but we
thought,
didn't
yeah.
add it as an agenda item.
So, I mean, I do kind of hear the concerns that were raised about this being added and such a big item being added at what appeared to be relatively short notice for families. So I'm wondering if, I would certainly be open to saying to table the vote if we need to allow the community to have more time to really get an understanding of what we're possibly going to be accepting in terms of this evaluation. So I don't know if anyone else is feeling that way, but I kind of feel that way. So again, I'm just putting this out there as something to see if we could open that up. What are your thoughts?
Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Would it
I guess I-
impact the evaluation in any way if we voted on it in December instead?
Delay it.
Delays
the work.
Right, but would that delay somehow impact the evaluation report in a significant way?
I didn't hear that.
Hmm?
Can you repeat your question?
Would delaying the vote and obviously delaying the evaluation and report have some major impact on the report or like moving forward?
I mean, it just delays it for time. So it just, I would assume my hope is that, it's for the remainder of the school year. So as long as they can get done within the budget year so June 30th is the end of our budget year. We can encumber funds, I guess, if it goes into the next year, but that I would defer to my chief over here on how all that works from for a budget standpoint, if we're using this year's dollars for something next year. I don't know how that works.
Because we're paying for that service, so you can encumber the funds now to pay for that service. If it extends into the next school year, it's still coming out of this year's budget. It's just considered
Okay.
a rollover, not.
Okay.
included in-
Okay, so that's good to know.
I think that I see the intention, but we don't have any meetings between now and next meeting.
Correct.
So we would still, the only way the public would be able to share feedback is through email with us. I think that the Comegno has made it very clear that they're willing to entertain any and all questions and any all feedback. So I feel like my decision would remain the same, regardless of any questions that were asked, because they have been so flexible in terms of how they have been responding.
Yeah, my decision would probably be the same too. I don't think that's really my reason for saying why not. I think my reason for saying that is just to give the public an opportunity to have more time to do their kind of due diligence as a public, right? Whether that's asking us questions or just feeling like they feel like they've had enough time to process this. That's all I'm saying. Again, not that it necessarily will change anyone's vote here at the table, but if we're not, this isn't a program evaluation. This is not something that is, we're being constrained by time, right? We're not trying to reach a certain deadline, and it is a very costly evaluation. So
If I could add, if the evaluation starts earlier and we have information that changes the programming, which could impact the budget, we would be able to implement that sooner, like put that in the budget for next year. You know, the budget's due, comes together by March. So I'm not sure how long an evaluation takes. But if that information could filter back and allow Dr. Suska to make educational decisions, it would impact the budget for next year. Otherwise, we may have to wait another budget cycle in order to implement the changes that are needed.
Yeah,
Suggested.
my thoughts, I think it's a very, fair point. My thought on this being really intimately intertwined in the process from the beginning and seeing the other proposals. And to me, it's quite frankly, a little bit of a risk in that we want to get information that's going to inform our opportunity to actually, implement some changes. So aligning with the budget to me seems really important. If I had questions about, some of the proposal or, I think that would, I would say something different, but.
Well, when is our next meeting? I'm trying to figure out, because again,
December 16th.
So my understanding is that they're just doing an evaluation. They're not changing anything for us. And at the end of the evaluation, we make that decision whether or not we do want to make those changes. Am I correct? So, and if delaying still wouldn't change our minds of voting, I don't see the reason to delay when we can always still answer questions openly and honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we've also done my understanding is a pretty extensive review of the proposals through Equity and Excellence and through meetings with CPAG in terms of including questions and so forth. So I feel like it's a pretty extensive, and I'm not hearing any concerns about the proposal itself at this point because we've gone so far. So I would be comfortable voting on it tonight. Anybody else?
I just to really, really put emphasis on it's only as good as, they're going to have great suggestions, and we really want to have the care and the time to think about what they're telling us and be completely methodical in how we incorporate it into the budget. And a month, these program evaluations take a long time. They do. And so I personally, missing that window, that to me concerns me.
all I'm saying is I don't think we're missing a huge window because of the holiday season. So I mean, I think the timing doesn't make it as huge of a window. But again, I'm just putting this out there, and I think I hear everyone, and I think I'm in agreement that at this table and amongst ourselves, you've had rigorous conversations with CPAG, but I think these are valid points that were raised about perhaps some families feeling like they were not made aware of this in a timely manner and that transparency.
So I do want to clarify
So I
that
don't- maybe
CPAC was emailed Thursday morning with the agenda and attachments. So the regular agenda was mailed out on Friday, but Dr. Suska did send that out Thursday morning. So there was previous access. It's not a lot of time, I agree.
Right.
But when this is on a committee agenda from a Thursday night, because it was on your final agenda for Thursday, that was kind of like the earliest time, I think.
Because of the Equity and Excellence.
Because of the
meeting.
Equity and Excellence Committee.
But we've been discussing the evaluation for many months. And so it's been on our agenda, not the specific, not their specific, not Comegno specifically, but
Just in general discussion.
the coming of this evaluation.
Well, thank you, everyone. I just wanted to open the discussion up. I think it's,
important conversation.
important to have a
Important.
conversation.
Yeah, I think it's
I will say I'm
important.
outnumbered and it's okay.
It's good. It's helpful though.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
you're forcing us to think
Thank you.
carefully.
Personnel and communication.
Personnel and communication has not met since our last workshop meeting, but there are some new items on the agenda that I'll go over. Starting with number 1, approval of appointments. There's a couple new ones here. We have a new school nurse at Bartle being proposed tonight. In addition to quite a few others, including a new acting principal at the middle school to cover a leave, and that'll be Mr. DePayne. Mix Perez as the interim assistant principal at the high school. And then a bunch of some new student aides, that was new to me, actual high school students who will be aiding at the after-school program. Number 2, we have approval of leave of absences. There are 3 maternity leaves and a medical leave. Approval of resignations, a site assistant at the after-school program. And then another school change, approval of a transfer of Mr. Richardson from the high school assistant principal to the middle school, also to cover the leave. Then, except his start date has changed. It's effective 1/2/25 to 4/18/25. Let's see, then approval of volunteers. We have a new one for the Science Bowl Club and approval of professional development. And I'll just go over some of the topics. Some of them are really interesting. Empowering Green Actions, a guide to completing district green initiatives. A HIB, what you need to know. Preschool Pyramid, Module 1 and 2, Nurturing and Responsive Relationships. And Module 3 and Module 5 of the same, Addressing Challenging Behaviors. And that's it for personnel. Any questions?
No questions? Okay, policy.
Also, nothing new to report since last time we met as a board. The 2 policies that are up for first read that I spoke about last time, revisions to our regulations on field trips, and revision of our procurement procedures for school nutrition programs. And I discussed both 2 weeks ago, so they're up for first read.
Okay. Hold on, I have to find the. Okay. We're going to move to the second public comment. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and has reserved this time for your comments. Board policy number 0167 establishes and regulates the rights of the public to participate in public meetings. Is there anybody in person for public comment? Is there anybody online for public comment? Angelo, how many people do we have on Zoom? And is there anybody on Zoom for public comment? Okay. We're going to close public comment. We're now going to go through our board action items. For curriculum and instruction, I would like to move items 1 through 4.
Second.
Dr. Beatty?
Yes.
Ms. Cassel Dunn?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Dr. Pixley?
Yes.
Ms. Bruce?
Yes.
Dr. Schoolman?
Yes.
Ms. Stanio?
Yes.
Ms. Vardaman?
Yes.
Ms. Voorhees?
Yes.
Equity and excellence, I don't think, no. Okay, finance and facilities.
I move items 1 through 20.
Second.
Dr. Beatty?
Yes.
Ms. Cassel Dunn?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Dr. Pixley?
Yes.
Ms. Bruce?
Yes.
Dr. Schoolman?
Yes.
Ms. Stanio?
Yes.
Ms. Vardaman?
Yes.
Ms. Voorhees?
Yes.
Personnel and communication.
I'd like to move items 1 through 7.
Second.
Sorry.
Important job you got there.
The change to number 4, Jason Richardson, correct?
With the change to number 4, Jason Richardson.
Dr. Beatty?
Yes.
Ms. Cassel Dunn?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Dr. Pixley?
Yes.
Ms. Bruce?
Yes.
Dr. Schoolman?
Yes.
Ms. Stanio?
Yes.
Ms. Vardaman?
Yes.
Ms. Voorhees?
Yes.
And policy and regulations.
I move number 1, A and B.
Second.
It's your job. You gotta do it.
Dr. Beatty?
Yes.
Ms. Cassel Dunn?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Dr. Pixley?
Yes.
Ms. Bruce?
Yes.
Dr. Schoolman?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Ms. Vardaman?
Yes.
Ms. Voorhees?
Yes.
All right, we're going to move on to board liaison reports.
Ed Foundation is meeting tomorrow night, I believe.
Yes.
Okay,
Attending that.
all right. I do not have a president's report, except to remind everyone that we do have a special meeting scheduled for December 5th. At which point we have our representative from NJSBA, Marianne, coming to talk about committee structure and to entertain the idea of reorganizing committee structure for January and reorganizing, well, and adjusting the calendar to one meeting per month, which would be the combination workshop voting meeting. So that is open to the public. It's called a retreat. It is not the kind of retreat you want a retreat to be.
We don't get a spa, right?
Yep. But you guys can come in or on Zoom, watch. But there is no decision making, no committee reports, nothing like that. It's all going to be information from Marianne and discussion, and then some decision making on our part.
Just forgot about that.
Put that in your calendar.
Put on your calendar, please.
I had to harass everyone for the doodle poll. Okay, any old business?
So I think I have an old business. I don't know if it goes on old or new, but I know I've spoken to like internet safety before and asked many questions. And I was just wondering if we could discuss or bring up, there are a lot of issues in many, many schools with posting videos and social media. And I was wondering if we have any kind of programs or resources to educate our students on how to keep themselves safe from that or properly use social media or any kind of internet safety.
So we definitely do. There's very specifics I don't have, but I can follow up with the curriculum documents that's posted on the district website and available from our media center specialists that have written curriculum over the years from K through 5, and then at the middle level through our makerspace classes, and then with Ms. Puccio at the high school. So I'll follow up with very specific information there.
I a thought just based off our previous conversation as it relates to follow up with the, I don't know if I could bring it up now. Is that okay? So one of the things that this really got me thinking in, timing for, for the actual work that's to be done. And I wonder, because it's going to be so important to integrate findings into the budget, if we could follow up to just see the timing. And we may want to ask them if it's not going to be done by critical moments, that they do some kind of intermediary check-in. So we can at least get some information that could help us, because that to me is actually like, which is also why I feel a sense of urgency. Just can we create some milestones depending on the timing that'll really help us in bringing this report to life and integrating its great recommendations. So.
I had to think about what you were.
We circle back to the Cabegno Institute proposal. I was following Dr. Pixley's chain of thought, but just to piggyback on that. So one of the things I did do was that I already sent an email to John and Sarah and the team to say that I was the point of contact for that reason, that it's really important. First and foremost, Miss Teacher and her group are incredibly overwhelmed right now with a bunch of other reports that they have to do. This is a very report heavy time of year for everyone in the business office and in special education in our data department. So being mindful of that, I did want to hit the ground running really quickly so that we could get those key indicators relatively soon. So that's why I'm going to oversee it out of my office and to manage it. That way it takes a little bit of the weight off of the heavy work that's happening in the special education department now, that myself and my amazing team can help with whatever they need to get started. And that way then information can flow back to my office so that we can make very important decisions in a timely way.
Great, thank you.
All right, any new business?
Do you want another report on where we are in our education system? What might be coming down the pike? Maybe I'll wait for the next meeting.
We just hanging like that?
Yes, I will.
On the edge of my seat.
I don't have any juicy intel, but I do think we need to, again, and it's something I raised at our last meeting, just kind of be mindful of kind of the threat we have to our public education system as we know it, at least at the federal level. And just,
Yeah.
I really want to know what our school board association is doing. It's not sort of at a county and state level, state level, to really be mindful of monitoring this process and sort of what's going to be coming down the pike. So we're not reactionary, but we're really preparing. And
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of also, I think, one of the reasons behind like me just really being excited to get this program evaluation going is to just know. Right.
right.
So, I don't want to have to run into obstacles if anything comes down federally in the coming months. And that's a concern for, I think, a lot of us with students that receive services and a lot of us that provide services to students as well.
And our equity work. I mean, we talked about
And
the
our
RISE
equity work,
program
yeah.
and our issues around that. And I mean, we know that that's not favored kind of by the incoming administration and what they're thinking about for our schools. So.
I happened to talk to a rep from New Jersey ASA this morning, actually, about this situation, and they're watching it very, very closely, monitoring it. I have some information, but I just don't have my notes in front of me, but I can circle back to the board on some of the work that they're watching from a legislative perspective and changes at the federal level that may impact us. So I am monitoring that very, very closely, and I'll circle back with my notes.
Thank
That just
you.
came out this morning. I didn't have time to put it together, but
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
thank you. I think we need to be
yeah,
doing that.
incredibly mindful of that. Yep.
I think holding school boards sort of accountable to do that for us, right? To be.
Well,
right? You
that's what,
think that
yeah,
would be their role,
exactly. I've been watching their page, like waiting for something to
Yeah.
come out there. But
Their next meeting is December 12th.
okay.
Is their next program. It's about budgets. But hopefully somebody will ask a question about.
I mean,
Well, I mean, that
that's
is
what it
part of it, right? If
Yeah,
they're
but
gonna-
that is
if they're
part of it,
getting
I
rid of the
think.
federal funding, then how does that impact local funding here?
Decision making. Yeah, it's ultimately budget, and that's going to affect policy and programs and so forth.
Absolutely. Well, one of their solutions is, hey, to tell superintendents and boards to the tax levy go from 2% to, I think they were proposing up to 9.9%.
Yeah.
And that's just not sustainable for communities in general. So I know the whole point of their the school finance and figuring out how to budget that, their equation for figuring that out with S2 was supposed to level the playing field. It didn't exactly do that
No.
to finance schools.
Okay, to be continued.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, I move to adjourn.
Oh,
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Happy Thanksgiving,
Happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Fraction of a second.